Wanna play?
Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play?
Wanna play?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wanna Play. My name is James McKenna. As you can see, the setup looks a little bit different today. That's because over the past couple weeks, I've been redoing my entire setup, my entire room. So let me know if you want to see a room tour, because I would totally be down to doing one if you guys are interested in seeing that. But yeah, going forward, all of this is gonna be my new setup. And don't worry, that awkward spot up there where there's just one invisible man mecha box and there's nothing else, that'll be fixed over the next couple months as I buy more of those Universal Monster NECA figures that are coming out. But today, for our first video with this new setup here, I'm going to be ranking my all-time favorite franchise in horror. I have done this once before. It was probably around 3 years ago now, and for this being my favorite franchise, it's not the best video in the world. And of course, that franchise is Psycho. So that's what we're doing today. I thought, what better way to start off than, doing a Psycho ranking. So, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So starting off in last place should be no surprise, it's Psycho 1998. This is just the most probably utterly useless movie ever made, because it's a shot-for-shot remake. If you don't know what that is, it's literally beat for beat, line for line, shot for shot, the exact same film as the original from 1960, which I've seen people make the argument, oh, well, technically it's a great movie because it's the same as the 60s one, but no. You defeat your argument within your argument. It's a great movie because it's the same thing as another movie. Problem is it's the same thing as another movie. It doesn't make, any sense. They just thought, oh, why don't we just do the exact same thing but put it in color so that a new generation can experience it? That new generation, I suppose they were going for, is somebody like me. But being a part of that new generation, I can tell you 100,000% that the original is 20 million times better than this. The only thing that they add in this movie is Norman Bates going like that. That's the one extra scene in this movie that makes it stand out. And when that's your one scene that makes you stand out from the original movie in your series, it's so weird. There's nothing about this that makes it better in any way than the original. It's one that I would never watch again, because if I want to watch Psycho, I'm gonna watch the original. If you've seen a review for this, or you've seen a ranking that involves this movie, they pretty much everybody says the exact same thing. Why would you watch this when you have the original? And then not only is it not as strong as the original, but from a character perspective, it's so weird. This Vince Vaughn, that's not Norman Bates. That just defeats the purpose of what Norman Bates is supposed to be. Vince Vaughn is a big dude. Anthony Perkins in the original and the first four is he's kind of small. He's tall, but he's skinny and he's scrawny, so he doesn't really look intimidating. You wouldn't think that he's gonna be the killer, but he is, and his stature makes it all the more, shocking when he comes out as the killer. This guy, no, it just doesn't work for the character. So for those reasons, I just gotta put this in last place. There's no way it's not. Coming in at number 4, unfortunately it had to be one of them, and for me, number 4 is gonna be Psycho 4, The Beginning. Now don't get me wrong, as I said, this is my favorite franchise in all of horror. So even though this is the last place, I've said this a million times before, I think the original stretch of continuity, Psycho 1 through 4, is the most consistently amazing continuity in all of horror. These sequels are so underrated, and this is one of them. The only reason why it's in last place is because it just doesn't really have as much action as the other sequels, of course being 2 and 3. it's just kind of a send-off. Like, this movie isn't the most gripping tale, it's more of just a TV movie made to send off Norman Bates in the right way, and I think it succeeds in that. Like, it's one of the best horror prequels, I'd say top 3 with ease. So yeah, even though it's this low, it's not bad by any means. It's a prequel slash sequel, so some of the parts, it's kind of, so it follows Norman Bates, basically, who calls into this radio show, and he explains to the radio host, like, his whole backstory and all that stuff. So his backstory is where it cuts to a young Norman Bates, and we see him, how he was raised by his mother, and his mother is played by Olivia Hussey from Black Christmas, who does great as usual. She's always a joy to watch in films, and it's just really interesting to see all of this, like Norman Bates' upbringing, and the story behind it is really good too. It's that Norman Bates, after Psycho 3, he went to his psych ward, and then he got out again, completely cured, and now he has a wife, and his wife is pregnant, but he believes that his, psychotic nature is hereditary, and if his wife gives birth to this child, then he's gonna grow up to be the psycho killer that Norman Bates is. So he plans to kill her, and he tells the radio host this. He says, "I plan to kill her." And the radio host says, "No, Norman, don't let your mother out." And Norman Bates says, "I'm not letting my mother out. I'm the one that's gonna do the killing. Norman Bates is gonna be the killer in this, not the mother." And it all leads up to the end of the movie where he's going to kill her, and then he kind of realizes what he's doing and how wrong it is, and they make up. It sounds a little bit ridiculous, but when you actually watch the movie, it's told and it plays out in such a nice way, and it's just a great send-off for the character of Norman Bates. I think really the only thing that lets it down a little bit when compared to the rest is that it is, yes, more focused on sending off Norman Bates in a cool way that's fitting for the character rather than the whole story throughout the whole movie. So for me, Psycho 4: The Beginning is amazing. It's phenomenal, one of the best prequels of all time. But just because the others are so good, it's gonna have to be number 4. So coming in at number 3 is going to be Psycho 3. Now, these next two were a very, very difficult debate for me because I loved both of these next two movies for completely different reasons. I think part of why the Psycho franchise is my favorite is because every movie brings something different to the table, and this one is kind of like the full-on slasher of the series. And it's just such a great follow-up to Psycho 2, because at the end of Psycho 2, Norman Bates finally is driven back to full insanity. And this is pretty much a direct continuation of that, which I just think is great. We get to see Norman Bates in full psycho mode, which I think is different from the original, because the original film, we really didn't get to see Norman Bates going crazy that often. Like, the first half was focused on a completely different character, and he only kills 2 people, and you only really get to see how crazy he is at the very end in one of, like, the last shots of the movie. So this one, we get to see Norman Bates going nuts throughout the entire runtime, and I think that's awesome. I think that's a really great choice, and it's just such a love letter to fans of that original movie. It's directed by Anthony Perkins, of course, who plays Norman Bates in the original films, and he knows what's up. Like, he's been a part of the series, and he's been playing this character for so long. He's pretty much like the perfect guy you'd want to direct a Psycho movie that isn't Alfred Hitchcock, and he does such a good job both directing and acting. There's so many great callbacks here to the original, and there's so many great kills and legendary lines, like, "Watch the guitar" is one of the most legendary, like, quotes in the whole series, when you have that kid who comes into the motel and he's just all like, he's all cocky and stuff. He thinks he's like a great guitarist, and Norman Bates keeps messing with his guitar, and every time he does it, the kid goes, "Hey, watch the guitar." And then Norman Bates eventually just gets pissed off about it enough that he literally just takes the guitar and just kills the kid with it. It's great. It is an awesome movie. I love the ending, where it's pretty much just a direct parallel ending of the original, but just with Norman Bates older. It's such a great story arc throughout the original 4 films, and this just adds so much to it. The only reason why it's a little bit low down on the list is because it doesn't really have that much of a gripping or memorable story. Like, there is some story beats, there's some kind of stuff that really doesn't go anywhere. Like, there's a nun who Norman Bates falls for, and she kind of runs away because I believe she accidentally killed another nun or something like that, and so she runs away and gets into, you know, a relationship with Norman Bates, and you think it's gonna be like, oh, so she accidentally killed somebody, Norman Bates is a killer, you know, she might go insane, they might be like a crazy killer couple, but it just kind of goes nowhere. And there's a couple of plot lines that they introduce in here that just don't go anywhere, and it is more of a slasher than like a story-driven movie, which the next 2 on the list are. So for me, it's phenomenal. It's amazing, one of the best slasher movies that you'll ever watch, but it just barely doesn't hold up to the original 2 in the series. So for me, Psycho 3 is gonna be number 3. But coming in at number 2 is gonna be Psycho 2. This is without question one of the most underrated horror films and one of the greatest horror sequels of all time. Like, bar none, no question, this is easily in my top 10, if not even top 5 greatest horror sequels. It's just that good. Like, people don't really give it a chance. They don't give it its fair shake because it's a sequel to Psycho, which came out in 1982. So it came out 22 years after the original, and people just, I guess they just don't really think that it's up to par, but believe me, it really is. It's got probably an even more gripping story to it because it's Norman Bates. He's released from his mental asylum, his mental, facility, completely cured, just back to normal human Norman Bates, not controlled by his mother at all. He doesn't think of her at all. And for some reason, they decide to release him back to the Bates Motel. I don't exactly know why the police force would do that, but we all know that they can be pretty stupid sometimes. So they release Norman Bates back out into the wild, back out into the Bates Motel, and he's normal. He's living a normal life. He goes into town, he's going to the diner, he goes shopping and stuff, but all around the place, people call him out, and people are like, look who it is, it's the Psycho, it's the man who killed these people all those years ago. I can't believe you're back out on the street. And people are like, spitting at him, calling him names and stuff, and he's just trying to live a normal life until he befriends somebody who turns out to be, I believe, the niece of Marion Crane and the daughter of Lila Crane, who of course was, I guess the final girl in the original film. And it's revealed throughout the movie that this girl isn't exactly what she seems, because she befriends Norman Bates, they begin a romantic relationship, but then eventually, of course, Norman Bates finds out that this girl is Lila Crane's daughter, and through that he finds out that basically they've been trying to manipulate him into bringing his mother back out and becoming a full-blown killer again, so that he can be locked away forever, because of course Lila doesn't think that the guy who killed her sister should just be out, roaming free. So that's pretty much the plan they devised, but Lila's daughter does actually begin to fall for Norman Bates. Like, she realizes, Norman Bates is just a normal guy again. He doesn't deserve this. It wasn't, really his fault that he killed Marion. And she realizes how wrong this all is, and eventually pretty much it backfires and Norman Bates ends up killing them both. But then there's another strange twist at the end, and it's so great. There's so many great twists and turns throughout this movie. It's one of the most unpredictable movies you'll ever see, because it just goes in so many different directions, and every direction it chooses to go in is really great. Just Anthony Perkins, yet again, comes in here, absolutely kills it as Norman Bates, one of the best casted horror characters, not even just villains, of all time, and he proves it here yet again. So for me, Psycho 2 has to be number 2 on this list, because it's amazing, and you must check it out if you haven't already. But at number 1 with ease has to be the original Psycho from 1960. This is just one of my favorite horror films of all time. Top 10 with ease. I believe last time I did a video of my top 10 all-time horror films, it placed at number 6. It's just amazing. The amount of stuff that it did for the horror genre, like, it basically invented the concept of slashers. Like, it wasn't really like Halloween or Friday the 13th where it, like, you know, inspired a whole influx of slashers, but this is basically kind of the bare bones, like, formula for a slasher. But it's not just a slasher, it's really a psychological thriller. It's way more of a psychological thriller than a straightforward horror movie, but it's so good. Hitchcock is just such a master director that the story that this movie tells just feels so fresh, and it just flows so well. Like, this movie is slow paced. Like, there's a lot of times where you feel like just really not a lot is happening. Like, you're just kind of watching this girl kind of just drive down the freeway of Arizona. But through the use of, you know, sound effects and camera work and just sheer suspense, Alfred Hitchcock just crafted one of the best horror films of all time. Norman Bates is such a legendary horror villain that just has so many layers to him and got such a fascinating backstory as to how he ended up this way. And there's just so many great twists and turns throughout the movie where, you know, you at first think that Norman Bates is just arguing with his mother. He's got a, you know, really manipulative and abusive mother, but then you start to slowly learn that Norman Bates' mother isn't even alive anymore, so who could have been talking and who could have been yelling, and it's so great the way it unfolds. And as I've previously said in this video, Hitchcock's casting of Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates was so great because you don't think that this guy's the killer when you first meet him. Like, you know it's a horror movie and you know that something is gonna happen, but when you first meet this guy, he's so innocent at first, and then he slowly starts to unravel, and you slowly start to see him become creepier and get weirder and stranger. And then it, of course, all, you know, culminates when you get that shower scene. And that's not even the culmination of the film, that's the culmination of Marion Crane's story, which is the first 45 minutes maybe. And it's such a great twist because you think that this girl's gonna be, you know, the final girl. You think she's gonna be the main character, when all of a sudden she's just in the shower and this just shadow slowly approaches. You see it, the shadow opens the curtain, you don't see who it is, and stabs her over and over and over and over. And there's almost like 200 different shots, but Alfred Hitchcock directed it so great that it's all of the shots, even though there's like 200 of them, flow together so well. And just that scene, the shower scene in Psycho, is arguably the greatest scene in horror movie history. And then it doesn't stop there. That's like really the climax. That's the movie at its best. But even after that, when you slowly start to, you know, reveal that it is Norman Bates as the killer, and you start to reveal, you know, his motives and how he hides the body and stuff, it's all just so interesting. And there's so many twists and turns that make this movie just one of the best movies of all time. Like, even according to people, like movie critics that aren't into horror, like, there's so many movie critics that just trash on the horror genre and trash on stuff like Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. Even most of them have reviewed this movie positively because it's just that good. It's one of the greatest, most influential, most important horror films of all time, and without question, Psycho has to be number 1. So thank you for watching my upgraded ranking of the Psycho franchise. Now, I do know that there is another movie out there called Bates Motel, but I don't really know much about it. Like, I don't know if it's a prequel or a sequel, or if it's even affiliated with the Psycho franchise as a whole. And of course, there's the Bates Motel TV series that came out a few years ago. So let me know, I guess, if you would want to see me rank this series with those included, because I will if it's something that you'd be interested in checking out. But for now, as it stands, this is my official ranking of my official favorite horror franchise. And once again, I strongly advise you to check these out if you haven't already, because they're just amazing. Like, these movies are so good, with the exception of that remake. The first four, the original stretch of continuity, is phenomenal. Also, I'm gonna apologize for my lack of content recently, pretty much just because, you know, I've been doing this, I've been redoing my entire, you know, area and trying to find the best way to shoot videos and do all that. But I'm back now. You have me again, so you're welcome. And yeah, came back strong with my ranking of my favorite horror franchise. Stay tuned, because there is going to be uploaded later this month. I won't really give hints, but it's going to be a sort of vlog slash film locations video, and it is going to be, without a doubt, probably the biggest video on my channel that I have ever uploaded. And that's coming this month, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for everything else. I'm thinking of doing maybe collection videos, like a, you know, horror figure collection or a Funko Pop collection or stuff like that. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that in the comments down below. But for now, I want to thank you all once again very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye and good night. Bang!